Rhett Harlow didn't expect his Saturday to end with a small child clinging to his chest and a woman screaming like the world was ending. "Hey! Hey! It's okay, I've got you," he said, crouching low in the middle of the packed park, trying to calm the little girl in his arms. She couldn't have been older than 4, tiny, shaking, her cheeks streaked with tears. She had gotten caught in the rush of a crowd chasing after a balloon release, and when she tripped beneath the stampede of running feet, Rhett reacted without thinking. He'd scooped her up, shielding her with his body before anyone could step on her. He looked up just in time to see a woman in heels and a pale pink coat sprinting toward them. "Vera!" she cried, breathless and panicked. The child in his arms turned her face, instantly sobbing harder. "Mommy!" Rhett gently stood, holding Vera out so her mother could take her. The woman's hands trembled as she pulled her daughter close. "I looked away for 1 second," she gasped, hugging her fiercely. "Thank God, thank you so much." Rhett rubbed his neck, still trying to catch his breath. She tripped. "I just did what anyone would do." "No. You didn't hesitate. You ran straight into a crowd like she was your own," the woman said, her voice shaking. Rhett glanced down at his torn jeans and worn sneakers. "Honestly, I'm just glad she's safe." She looked up at him, then really looked. Her eyes were a deep hazel, wide and glossy with leftover panic. A gust of wind blew a strand of hair across her cheek as she held Vera close, and for a second, Rhett forgot how broke and exhausted he was. "I'm Marlowe Jensen," she said, lifting her chin slightly. "And this is Vera." He smiled. Rhett Harlow. "And I've got a 6-year-old son somewhere near the swings." Marlowe's eyes softened. "You're a dad?" "Full-time. Just us two. His mom left when he was a baby," Rhett said, trying not to make it sound like a sob story. "We come here every Saturday. He's probably trying to break a world record on the monkey bars." She gave a soft laugh, and it did something weird to his chest. "You saved my daughter," she said. "Can I at least buy you a coffee?" Rhett hesitated. Coffee sounded great. But he also had $8 to last until Monday. Before he could answer, a small blur ran toward him. "Dad! Did you see that backflip?" a little boy shouted, his curly brown hair bouncing as he skidded to a stop. "Wait! Who's that?" "This is Vera and her mom," Rhett said, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Vera got lost in the crowd. I helped her find her way back." His son beamed. "Cool. I'm Vaughn. My dad's like a superhero." Marlowe looked between them, a strange expression crossing her face. "Hi, Vaughn." "Hi." Vaughn grinned at Vera. "Wanna see the best monkey bar jump ever?" Vera sniffled, then nodded slowly. Marlowe met Rhett's eyes. "Maybe coffee could wait." Would you two want to join us for lunch? There's a diner just across the street." Rhett opened his mouth to politely decline, but Vaughn beat him to it. "Can we, Dad? Please? I'm starving. And they have milkshakes there." Rhett looked at Marlowe, who gave a small smile. "Lunch sounds great," he said, feeling something shift that he couldn't quite name. They walked to the edge of the park, kids skipping ahead, and for the first time in a long time, Rhett didn't feel the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. He just felt light. The diner was simple, but clean. They slid into a booth by the window. Vaughn and Vera colored with crayons from the hostess while Rhett and Marlowe looked over menus. As they waited for their food, Marlowe kept sneaking glances at Rhett. He noticed but didn't say anything. "So, what do you do?" she asked, stirring her iced tea. He shifted. "Construction. Mostly part-time right now. It's been a rough year." "Rough how?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Lost steady work last winter. Been picking up jobs where I can. Roofing, drywall, whatever pays." "Vaughn's the reason I hustle so much." Marlowe leaned in slightly. "He seems like a great kid." "He is. Total maniac, though," Rhett said with a laugh. He's got more energy than I know what to do with. What about you? He asked, nodding toward her. You work? Marlowe paused. I do. I co-own a few companies. Mostly tech and investments. He raised a brow. So you're like a boss. She chuckled. Something like that. He didn't push. He liked that she hadn't acted better than him all day. She didn't flash labels or drop names. Just a kind woman with a kid and a heart. Their food came: burgers, fries, milkshakes, and the kids devoured everything. Rhett noticed Marlowe watching him when he gave Vaughn the last of his fries without hesitation. He caught her staring. What? He asked, wiping his mouth. She blinked. Nothing. Just. You're a good dad. Rhett looked down at his plate. I try. After lunch, they walked back to the park. The sun dipped low, casting gold through the trees. Vera clung to Marlowe's hand, and Vaughn ran ahead, spinning with his arms out like an airplane. Marlowe stopped walking. Rhett? Yeah? He turned. I meant it earlier. You saved her. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there. I was just in the right place. She stepped closer. I'd really like to see you again. He blinked. You would? I know it's sudden. But I don't meet many people who feel real. You're good. And Vaughn's amazing. I'd like to get to know you both. His heart thudded. Yeah. I'd like that too. She smiled, and it hit him straight in the chest. They exchanged numbers scribbled on a napkin because either had a pen and promised to meet again the next weekend. As she walked away with Vera, Rhett watched her go, feeling something stir deep in his gut. He had no idea who she really was. And she had no idea she was about to fall in love with a man who had nothing except a big heart. And a kid who thought he could fly. Rhett stood outside the small elementary school building, the afternoon sun warm against the back of his neck. Vaughn burst through the doors with his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Dad! Guess what? I got picked to be the line leader next week. Rhett grinned as his son skidded to a stop in front of him. That's huge. You ready for the pressure? Vaughn puffed up his chest, clearly proud. Born ready. Rhett ruffled his curls and took his hand. Let's grab your favorite after-school snack. They had barely made it halfway down the sidewalk when a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The back window lowered, and Marlowe leaned out. Need a ride? She asked, her smile easy but her eyes searching his. Rhett blinked. How did you? Vaughn mentioned the school last time. I was nearby for a meeting and figured I'd take a chance. I thought your car was, not this one. She cut in quickly. I switched depending on the day. The driver stepped out and opened the door with a sort of polished efficiency Rhett had only ever seen in movies. Vaughn's eyes widened. Whoa, he whispered. That's like a spy car. Marlowe laughed. It's just a town car. Nothing too wild. Rhett hesitated, then nodded. All right. But only because someone's been begging for soft pretzels all week. Inside, the leather seats were spotless, and the air smelled faintly of citrus and something expensive he couldn't name. Vaughn stared out the tinted windows like he'd entered another universe. The driver pulled smoothly into traffic. Marlowe turned toward Rhett. I hope this doesn't feel too forward. Just after last weekend, I haven't stopped thinking about you. He shifted slightly in the seat. Is that so? I mean, I know we don't know much about each other, she said, brushing a piece of hair behind her ear. But I'd like to change that. Rhett glanced at Vaughn, who was now making airplane noises with his hands as the car turned a corner. You always go this hard for second meetings? Marlowe smiled. Only when the first one feels like a door opening. They pulled up outside a quiet cafe tucked between two art galleries. The driver parked with practiced ease, and the hostess greeted Marlowe by name as they entered. You're a regular here? Rhett asked, noticing the crisp linen tablecloths and gleaming wine glasses. Sometimes, she said, taking a seat near the window. It's quiet. No one bothers you here. A waiter appeared, placing menus in front of them without being asked. Vaughn immediately spotted something he liked. They have the cinnamon sugar pretzels, he said, bouncing in his seat. Rhett looked at Marlowe. All right, I'm impressed. I like to be prepared. As they ordered, Marlowe leaned slightly toward Rhett. So, what's something I don't know about you yet? He considered. I fix things. Like anything. Cars, plumbing, busted appliances. Guess it started because I couldn't afford to pay someone else. You learned because you had to. Yeah. And now I kind of like it. There's something satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again. Marlowe nodded slowly. That makes sense. He tilted his head. What about you? What's something you don't advertise? She looked at him, then down at her water glass. I inherited my first company when I was 23. I wasn't ready. Everyone waited for me to fail. Rhett didn't blink. But you didn't. No. I didn't. But for a while, I wanted to run away from all of it. The pressure, the weight of it. He studied her. So why didn't you? Because I realized I didn't have to be what they expected. I could be more. There was something in her tone, quiet steel, not arrogance, that Rhett respected. Vaughn interrupted by dropping a chunk of pretzel into his lemonade. Oops. Marlowe laughed and handed him another napkin. That's all right. Accidents happen. Rhett watched the exchange. She was good with Vaughn. Not performative, just natural. That mattered more than he wanted to admit. After lunch, they strolled down the street. Marlowe stopped in front of a bookstore with enormous windows and a display of children's books shaped like a castle. Do you two have a weekend routine? She asked, peering through the glass. We usually hit the flea market on Sundays, Rhett said. There's a guy who sells used comic books for next to nothing. Vaughn tugged on Marlowe's sleeve. And Dad lets me pick one even if it has zombies. Marlowe smiled. That sounds like a great tradition. They stepped inside, and Vaughn ran ahead toward the graphic novels. Marlowe wandered beside Rhett, trailing her fingers across the spines of the hardcover books. Do you read much? She asked. When I get a moment. He picked up a thick novel. Lately it's more manuals and bedtime stories. I used to read to Vera every night, she said softly. Now she wants to do it herself. Says I make the voices too dramatic. Rhett chuckled. That's the best part. She glanced up at him, and the air between them changed. It was quieter somehow, filled with something unsaid. He looked away first. They let Vaughn choose a book, and Marlowe paid for it before he could protest. As they exited the store, the wind had picked up, and she pulled her coat tighter around her. Rhett noticed goosebumps on her arm. Without thinking, he shrugged off his hoodie and offered it. You'll freeze, he said. I'm fine, she replied. Humor me. She slid her arms into it, and it dwarfed her. You know this thing smells like sawdust and laundry soap? Pretty much sums me up. She looked at him then, something warm flickering in her expression. I like it. The car pulled up again, and Vaughn climbed in with his new book clutched tightly. As Rhett helped Marlowe into the back seat, she turned. Would you come to dinner? Tomorrow night. My place. He hesitated. That's a big step. I'll cook, she said, tilting her chin slightly. And you can bring Vaughn. He can show Vera his new book. Rhett studied her. All right. But only if you promise no fancy stuff. No promises, she said, eyes dancing. But I'll try. The door clicked shut, and the car rolled away. Rhett stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, Vaughn beside him, the city moving around them like a film reel. Something was shifting. And whether he was ready or not, he could feel it pulling him in. Rhett wiped his hands on the back of his jeans as he stepped onto the tall stone steps leading to Marlowe's townhouse. He'd never seen this part of the city up close, quiet, tree-lined streets and elegant buildings with polished brass knockers and flower boxes that actually looked alive. Vaughn clutched his comic book in one hand and a small bouquet of dandelions in the other, picked from a patch outside their apartment building. "This is her house," Vaughn whispered, eyes wide as he craned his neck to look up at the massive windows. Rhett nodded, adjusting the collar of the only button-down he owned that didn't have paint on it. "Looks like it." He pressed the doorbell, and within seconds the door opened not to Marlowe, but to a woman in a slate blue dress with her hair pulled back into a sleek knot. "You must be Mr. Harlow," she said with a warm, professional tone that didn't match the usual greetings Rhett was used to. Yeah? Rhett. This is Vaughn." The woman stepped aside. "Ms. Jensen is waiting in the garden. I'll take you through." As they followed her through the house, Rhett took in the surroundings without letting his son catch on. Everything was understated but luxurious arch ceilings, oil paintings, and furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. They passed the dining room with a table long enough to seat 20 and a piano that gleamed in the corner. "Do you think they let you play that?" Vaughn whispered, still holding his dandelions like they were made of glass. "Only if you also know how to pay for it," Rhett muttered under his breath. They stepped through a set of glass doors into a courtyard garden that looked like it had been stolen from a European postcard. Marlowe stood near a stone fountain, dressed in jeans and a soft navy blouse, barefoot on the flagstone like she did this every evening. "Hey!" she called, turning toward them. Vera dashed out from behind a hedge, waving. "Hi, Vaughn! Come see the turtles!" "Turtles?" Vaughn's face lit up, and he took off after her, clutching his book but dropping the flowers without noticing. Rhett bent to pick them up, brushing off the petals just as Marlowe reached him. "These are for you," he said, holding them out. She took them with a blink of surprise. "Dandelions? They're from our building's parking lot. Don't expect miracles. They're perfect," she said, and tucked them into a small vase on a side table like they belonged there. Rhett glanced around the garden ivy-covered walls, subtle lighting tucked into the greenery, and a long wooden table set for four under a pergola strung with tiny golden lights. "This is not what I expected," he admitted. Marlowe poured him a glass of something pale and sparkling. "What did you expect? Honestly? Take-out containers and folding chairs." She laughed, handing him the glass. "I don't do folding chairs." He took a sip and instantly realized it wasn't soda. "Is this non-alcoholic? Pear and jasmine. I wasn't sure what you'd prefer." He nodded, not sure what to say to a woman who had a backup sparkling drink just in case. The kids reappeared, grass-stained and breathless, and plopped into the chairs as Marlowe uncovered dinner: fresh pasta, roasted vegetables, and something that smelled like garlic and heaven. "I didn't cook everything," she said, catching his look. "I had help with the pasta. But I made the bread." Vaughn took a bite and groaned. "This is better than the school pizza." "High praise," Rhett said, grinning. They ate under the lights as the sun dipped behind the garden wall. The kids spent most of the meal trading superhero theories while Rhett and Marlowe talked in quieter tones. "So," he asked, keeping his voice low, "how many people work for you?" "Directly?" she said, chewing thoughtfully. "About 20. Indirectly, a few thousand. Depends on the project." He blew out a breath. "That's more people than all the tenants in our building. I don't run everything myself," she added quickly. "I have partners. Boards. Teams." "Still," he said, "that's a lot of pressure." "It is. But it can also be a lot of purpose. I didn't always know that." He leaned back in his chair. "You didn't seem nervous when I first met you." "That's because I was terrified. I just didn't have time to show it." He laughed, soft and genuine. "You're not what I expected either." "Oh? I figured anyone living in a place like this would be." He stopped himself. "Cold? Rude? Waving a designer bag in your face?" "I was thinking. Unavailable." She studied him. "What if I am?" He met her eyes. "Then I'll step back." They held the silence for a moment before she said, I'm not. Later, with the kids curled up on a bench reading together, and the crickets starting to hum, Marlowe walked Rhett to the front steps. I know this is a lot, she said, folding her arms as a breeze swept through the street. Yeah. It is. But I'm not asking you to change who you are. I like who you are. He glanced at her. You don't even know all of it. Then let me learn. He looked down, ran a hand through his hair. I'm not used to someone like you being this interested. I didn't think I'd be this interested either, she admitted. But I am. He leaned against the railing. Then I guess we'll just have to see where it goes. Marlowe stepped closer. You ever think about how chance works? Like fate? No. Like how 100 people could have been in that park that day, and it just happened to be you. He looked at her, quiet for a moment. I think about it every night. She reached up, brushing something off his shoulder, a stray leaf, maybe, or an excuse to be closer. Her hand lingered. Can I see you again? She asked. You're already seeing me now, he said, the corner of his mouth twitching. I mean beyond dinners and polite small talk. His throat tightened. Yeah. You can. She smiled, softer this time. Good. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But the air between them throbbed with something heavier than flirtation, something that had momentum now, something that neither of them could slow down even if they wanted to. As he and Vaughn walked home that night, the city felt different. Not lighter. Not heavier. Just changed. The first snowfall came early that year. Rhett stood outside the window of his apartment, watching the flakes gather on the rusted railing of the fire escape. Vaughn was curled up on the couch behind him, a blanket around his shoulders, his breath soft and steady as he slept. It had been 3 weeks since that night in Marlowe's garden. 3 weeks of evening phone calls once Vaughn was asleep. Of quiet dinners where Vera and Vaughn made up stories about superheroes who ran bakeries by day. Of Marlowe showing up outside Vaughn's school with 2 cups of coffee and a look that said she didn't want to be anywhere else. And now, she was standing in Rhett's kitchen. She was wearing a long camel coat and boots that probably cost more than his rent, but she didn't look out of place. She was leaning over the counter, her sleeves pushed up, helping him prep the grilled cheese sandwiches Vaughn had declared the best in the world. You're slicing that tomato wrong, she said, brushing her hair behind one ear. Am I? Yes. You're crushing it. He handed her the knife. Then you do it. She took over, and he watched her hands move, confident, careful, not the hands of someone who spent most of her time in boardrooms. You've done this before, he said. I used to cook for my mom when she worked late, she replied. Sometimes she'd come home too tired to eat, but I'd still have dinner waiting. He leaned against the fridge. Where is she now? Gone, Marlowe said simply. 4 years ago. Cancer. There wasn't grief on her face, at least not the kind that sat on the surface. But it was there, tucked into the precise way she wiped the counter down, how her voice dipped ever so slightly. I'm sorry. She was the reason I wanted more, she said. She worked her whole life for people who never saw her. I promised myself I'd never let anyone treat me like I didn't matter. Rhett nodded slowly. Sounds like she raised someone strong. Marlowe looked at him then, and for once, didn't look away. You matter to me, she said. The words landed between them like a match striking. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Because in the silence that followed, something deeper settled. Not attraction. Not curiosity. Commitment. The next morning, Rhett woke to find Vaughn already dressed, sitting at the kitchen table with Vera, who had arrived early with Marlowe. Vera says we're going on an adventure, Vaughn announced, his face glowing. Marlowe appeared in the doorway, holding a set of keys. Hope you two don't mind a surprise. The drive took them an hour outside the city. The roads narrowed, the buildings thinned, and finally they pulled up to a wide open stretch of land, bordered by trees dusted with snow. A small structure stood in the distance, half-finished, beams exposed, the scent of fresh lumber heavy in the air. Vaughn pressed his face to the window. Is that a house? It will be, Marlowe said. Rhett turned toward her. You buying land now? I already owned it, she said, voice calm. But I didn't know what to do with it. Now I do. He didn't answer, so she went on. I want to build something here. With you. With them. He stepped out of the car, the cold air biting at his skin, but all he could feel was the thrum of disbelief in his chest. You're serious? Yes, she said, joining him outside. I've been serious since the first night you made Vaughn give you the last fry without flinching. He laughed softly, though the sound was tight with emotion. And what? You're just going to hand me a house. No, she said. I want you to help me build it. For real. I hired a team to get the structure up, but they'll need someone to finish the inside. Someone who knows what it's like to make something strong with their hands. He stared at the frame again. You think this will fix everything? No, she said. But it's a start. He turned toward her. You're risking a lot. So are you. He let out a breath, white in the cold. I've never had anything like this. Never even imagined it. Marlowe reached for his hand. Then let's imagine it together. The weeks that followed were a blur of sawdust and laughter. Rhett worked on the house during the day, sometimes with Vaughn handing him nails or sanding boards beside him. Marlowe came every afternoon, bringing warm food and helping paint the walls, always in jeans now, her hands speckled with color and glue. She never hovered. Never second-guessed. She trusted him with every inch of the place. And that trust did something to him. Filled in cracks he didn't know had names. One night, as the house neared completion, they stood in what would be the living room. The windows were in, the walls painted, the floors gleaming under the soft overhead lights. I have something for you, she said, reaching into her coat pocket. He raised an eyebrow. If it's another bottle of fancy sparkling stuff, Vaughn already claimed the last one. She pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He opened it. It was a business license. Harlowe and Jensen Renovations. He looked up, stunned. You're giving me a company? No, she said. I'm building one with you. You're not working for me. We're doing this together. He stared at the paper, then back at her. You really don't do anything halfway, do you? Not when it matters. That night, as snow fell again outside their nearly finished home, Rhett kissed her for the first time. It wasn't rushed or frantic. It was slow, steady, the kind of kiss that says, I'm here. I'm staying. 3 months later, they opened the doors to their new house. Vaughn and Vera had bedrooms with skylights, bunk beds, and walls they were allowed to draw on. Rhett kept a toolbox in the garage and a sketch pad full of designs on the counter. Marlowe planted a garden along the side yard, where tiny green shoots reached for the sky. And in the middle of it all, two people who had collided because of a crowd and a cry and a moment of instinct now stood side by side. No secrets. No masks. Just a woman who had everything but love, and a man who had nothing but heart. Building something real. Together. The ribbon fluttered in the breeze as Marlowe secured it to the front gate, her gloved fingers smoothing it into a perfect bow. The new house stood behind her, glowing in the soft light of late afternoon, its wood siding catching the golden hues of winter's end. The finishing touches were done. The tools packed away. And tonight, for the first time, it would be more than just a project. It would be their home. Rhett stepped out from the side yard, wiping his hands on a towel. You didn't have to do the ribbon. Marlowe turned, her cheeks flushed from the cold. It's symbolic. He raised an eyebrow. Of what? That we survived sanding every floorboard without killing each other? Of beginnings, she replied. And yes, maybe that too. He moved in close, pulling off his gloves. You're serious about this being ours? Not just yours and I'm. Here. She reached up, brushing his collar flat. You built it. You live in it. You love in it. That makes it yours too. Rhett's jaw tightened slightly, the weight of the moment not lost on him. I've never had a key to something that wasn't temporary. Marlowe pulled a small silver key from her coat pocket and pressed it into his palm. Then let this be the first. Inside, the kids had already claimed their corners of the house. Vera and Vaughn had turned the upstairs loft into a blanket fortress, complete with flashlights and a "No grown-ups unless invited" sign. Music drifted faintly from the living room, a jazz record Rhett had found at a thrift store and insisted still sounded better than any playlist. Do you think they'll ever get tired of each other? Marlowe asked as she poured cider into 2 mugs. Not unless zombies invade their treehouse plans. Marlowe laughed, handing him a mug. You know, I used to think love was supposed to be polished, effortless, like it came with a manual. And now? Now I know it's messy. It's drywall dust in your shoes and burnt pancakes and 2 kids arguing over who gets the blue toothbrush. Rhett smiled into his drink. You really think this will work? I don't think, she said. I know. Later, after the kids were asleep, Vera curled up with her stuffed lion under a canopy of glow stars. Vaughn snoring quietly with his comic book still in hand. Rhett and Marlowe stood in the heart of the house. The fire crackled in the hearth, the scent of cedar and cinnamon wrapping around them. I've been meaning to ask you something, Marlowe said, her expression unreadable. Should I be nervous? She reached into the drawer of the console table and pulled out a small envelope. This came 2 weeks ago. I was waiting for the right moment. Rhett took it slowly, opening it to reveal a certificate, his contractor's license. Official. Framed. His name printed neatly across the top. He stared at it, stunned. You filed the paperwork? You did all the hours. You just didn't know how to submit it. His throat tightened. Marlowe, I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep building. With me. He set the frame down and pulled her into his arms. For the rest of my life. She looked up at him, her voice softer now. There's more. He blinked. More than a house, a business, and a miracle? Marlowe nodded and reached into her coat pocket. She withdrew a small velvet box. Rhett stared at it. You're proposing? Her lips curved gently. No. I'm asking if you'll let me love you the way you've loved us. Without conditions. Without fear. He took the box, opened it to find a simple gold band. Not flashy. Not loud. Just real. He slipped it into his pocket, then reached back and pulled a smaller box from beneath the couch cushions. Then I guess it's my turn. Marlowe's eyes widened. I built it myself, he said, opening the box to reveal a ring with a single, round diamond set in a delicate gold band carved with tiny vines. I didn't know if I'd be able to afford anything else. But I didn't want to wait. Marlowe covered her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. You made this? Every curve, he said quietly. Just like I made this life. With you. She nodded, unable to speak. He slid the ring onto her finger, and they stood there, wrapped in firelight and silence, and the kind of love that didn't need grand declarations to be felt. A month later, they wed in the garden behind the house. It was small, just the kids, a few close friends, and the wind brushing through the trees. Marlowe wore a dress that flowed like water, bare feet in the grass. Rhett wore a soft gray shirt and a look that said he didn't care if the world ended tomorrow, as long as she was beside him. Vaughn handed over the rings with the solemnity of a knight bestowing a sword. Vera tossed flower petals from a basket she insisted was too plain, so Marlowe had wrapped it in lace the night before. They said their vows under the archway Rhett had built himself, the same arch he'd promised would become a swing for the kids once the weather warmed. They didn't promise perfection. They promised effort. They promised honesty. They promised to never let the other forget where they started, no matter how far they went. And when Rhett kissed her, the world didn't spin faster. It simply settled. That night, with the stars above and the children fast asleep, Marlowe and Rhett sat on the porch swing, hands intertwined. You ever think about how different we are? She asked. Every day. And you're not scared? He looked at her, brushing his thumb over her knuckles. You're the first thing in my life that didn't scare me. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. You better not, he said. I built this house with the front door facing east. So I'd always see the sunrise. With you. And they did. Every morning after that, through laughter, through hard days, through the inevitable chaos of merging two lives, they watched the sun rise from their porch swing. Not because it was scheduled, but because it was theirs. Forever.